Since 1963, college tuition has increased by 197%, and that's adjusted for inflation. Why has the cost of education skyrocketed in recent decades while the quality of education hasn't seemed to significantly improve? If anything, I'd say it's degraded in quality. So why have average tuition rates at public four-year universities increased from just over $9,000 to almost $12,000 for in-state students just in the last 10 years, a 27% increase? There are a few direct answers like administrative bloat and non-instructional program expansion, but the root of the issue all comes down to one cause: federally subsidized loans that get paid directly to the school. As with any other department of the government, the Department of Education is perfectly willing to overpay for goods and services, especially in the case of student loans, because they expect to get paid back. Which just means they're perfectly willing to make an inexperienced 18-year-old kid overpay for his higher education. But why would the government do this to the next generation of Americans? Well, you could argue that they want to have a permanent interest revenue stream. But I'd say it's mainly because the government is generally incompetent and messes up everything it sticks its hands into. And while back in 1958, federal funding may have been well-intentioned to support students, a lack of oversight and foresight has forced millions of Americans into terminal debt. The government has an interest in educating the workforce, and why not incentivize education by offering student loans to help spread the cost out? The problem then turns into what every other government contract turns into: companies, or in this case universities, taking advantage of the government's financial guarantee. If I came to you and I said I'd like to buy a steady stream of services from you, you might ask me how much I can afford to pay. But now imagine I said, I don't care, these guys over here will pay me back however much it costs. You're very likely to not only take advantage of that by upping the cost, but you're also likely to increase the cost over time to pay for things or investments that you want. And I'm over here shelling out money willy-nilly because I'm going to get paid back, especially since there's no way for these guys to discharge their debt. We know how university costs have likely grown. Between 1976 and 2018, full-time administrators and other professionals employed by universities increased by 164 and 452%, respectively. From 1993 to 2007, instructional spending per student increased by 39%, while administrative spending per student increased by 61%. I mean, Yale has more administrators and managers than undergraduate students. Yet there's little evidence to suggest that these increases have bettered the student academic experience in any way. And the Department of Education has been standing by, aiding, abetting, and adding to this scheme for decades. The number of federal requirements placed on colleges and universities grew by 56% between 1997 and 2012. Regulation, accreditation, and federal subsidization make it difficult for innovative providers of higher education to emerge and offer the kind of competition the market needs to lower tuition prices. Universities today know they can afford this bloat because the government guarantees their paycheck. So why would they ever choose to lower costs? And it doesn't help that college kids today are basically adult children who demand to be babied, so universities are forced to provide daycare services for adults who can't handle the stress of a multiple choice test. This is where changing from direct to institution payments to direct to student payments comes in. If the government pays the student and then the student turns around and uses those funds to pay the school, then the university does not actually know how much the student is approved for, and especially if the government does not base financial offers off of that school's specific costs, and must reinstate the basic economic principle of competitive pricing into their tuition fees. It forces universities to reprioritize student affordability and educational efficiency. However, this would require the government to stop guaranteeing financial aid applicants the current cost of full tuition. And I'll admit in the short-term adjustment period that would follow, it may hurt a bit. But there's always a price to change, and if we want to fix the problem of higher education affordability for the long term, a little hurt now is better than a lot of hurt down the road. And maybe some of these schools with billions sitting in endowment funds can help out until the boat stops rocking. Instead of applying for federal financial aid based on how much tuition at a specific school is, the government should provide a flat rate offer to applicants based on financial need and average cost of enrollment. Applicants can then shop around and consider different college options with this offer, but universities won't know how much the prospective student is getting, so they'll actually have to try and make their programs competitive from a cost perspective. There is another benefit to paying students directly, and that is the option of providing greater financial aid for certain degree pathways. Because let's be honest, some degrees have no actual benefit to society.
Hi, my name is Sophie Lopez, and my concentration is titled Queering and Decolonizing Theater Practice.
Hi, my name is Maya, and my concentration is Journalism, Postcolonial Studies, and Psychoanalysis.
My name is Amina, and my concentration is titled The Criminal Mind, which is surrounded on criminology and applied psychology.
Hi, my name is Juliana. My concentration is international business and fashion through sustainable development.
Concentration is the performance of self.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. My concentration is creative direction, production, and narrative through the arts, performance, and written word.
Hi, my name is Karina Gomez, and my concentration is in journalism and Latin American studies with an emphasis in human rights, collective memory, and political violence.
I think if you want to get one of those degrees, then you should be able to, but I don't think the government or taxpayers have much reason to pay for that degree. So go ahead and get it, but you'll have to foot most of the bill on your own, whereas taxpayers certainly benefit economically from more engineers and more biochemists, so the government can offer more financial aid for students pursuing those degrees that have a higher return on investment like STEM and health degrees. Now the question is, what if a student enters the college as an engineering student but switches to sociology halfway through? Changing majors is a very common thing. 80% of students will change majors at one point. But the fact that one career path wasn't really what the student expected, or is more difficult than expected, isn't the fault of taxpayers. So the easy answer is that we can calculate the difference between the financial aid offer that the student would have received as a sociology major compared to what they did receive as an engineering major, and subtract the difference from future offers. This may sound complicated, but if the VA can verify, confirm, and adjust the enrollment and financial aid for 750,000 students using the GI Bill, then I think we can get the Department of Education to do the same for the other 17 million. I'm convinced that many people at the Department of Education do a lot of sitting around twiddling their thumbs anyways, and maybe they can ask for help from all of those new college administrators. Paying students directly can also consolidate and simplify financial aid in general, because it can be adjusted to whatever type of institution a student is going to. If a kid wants to go into a trade school, then they can apply for financial aid in the same way as anyone else, and their offer will be scaled to that of the trade. A one-stop shop for any type of education, where the government can look at the workforce and provide incentives for people to go into struggling industries. Giving the money to the student could potentially help teach them financial literacy as well as allow them to see what they're really spending on school. Instead of getting shocked by their student loan principal 6 months after graduating, they'll have to constantly see how much debt they're accruing. This might make them take school a little bit more seriously and push them to graduate in a timely manner. There are other ideas that can also help with the cost of college and student debt. One is encouraging more kids to go to community college for the first couple of years and then transfer to their school of choice. Community college obviously is cheaper, and many are within reasonable distances to their home, so room and board costs could be nixed if they're willing to stay at home. It also gives kids a couple of years to really figure out what they want to get their degree in without shelling $50,000 out in the process. Get your gen eds out of the way at community college and go to a university with a more narrow focus. I get we live in a culture where many high school seniors are looking to have the college experience, but I wouldn't say that's actually beneficial long-term or worth tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars that may or may not ever get paid back. 30 states offer free community college as well, so right off the bat, people could cut at least half of their potential student loan debt. Another is just to limit the amount of money that can be loaned to kids who likely have no financial foresight, or privatize the industry as a whole and put the risk in the hands of private lenders who can determine which prospective students they're willing to bet on, since private loans can be dischargeable. Clearly, something needs to change in the educational marketplace, but I don't think that expanding the problem by saying the government should cover all costs for everyone or the government should implement price caps are either fair or efficient. Although people, including myself, see that many university faculty members use their podiums as a means to socially, morally, and politically propagandize their students, when you separate that from the actual technical education provided, the US still tops the world, which is why we have so many international students. We can do multiple things at once: advocate for depoliticizing education, narrow higher education pathways funded by taxpayers to those that actually benefit society, and try to find more ways to make education affordable. I think all of these are related. By finding ways to force universities to cut unnecessary costs, the first things to go will be the same departments and administrators that push the political jargon into the classroom, many of which are no use to society anyways. So maybe By starting with cost and efficiency, we can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you agree, disagree, or have other ideas. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.